And so before we get started, let me professionally introduce Rebecca Gifford is a writer, communications executive, and former host of When Life Gives You Parkinson's, a podcast she produced with her husband and person with Parkinson's, Larry Gifford. She is a Parkinson's and care partner advocate and a proud PD Avenger. She facilitates creative writing and other workshops and webinars for Parkinson's organizations and beyond. She lives in Vancouver, British Columbia, with her husband Larry and their teenage son. Rebecca, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for asking me. I'm thrilled and excited to be here and to be part of this conversation. And I'm very grateful to the PMD Alliance for being supportive of this conversation and caring about care partners and caregivers. So I'll just get started to take a little bit more about me, just to give you perspective of kind of how I got here and talking about care partner programming and reframing it. Just a little bit more about me. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, as she said, with my husband, Larry, who is a person with Parkinson's, who was diagnosed about 8 years ago. And we have a 15-year-old son, Henry. Some additional information that may be helpful perspective as we talk about care partner programming and care partner support groups is that for about the last 5 years or so, I've been quite involved in care partner programming for a few different organizations. The World Parkinson Congress and Coalition, I was in the planning committee and helped to host and participate in their virtual series, and also in the Care Partner Lounge at the World Parkinson Congress in Barcelona. I facilitate writing workshops and care partner support groups at the Brain Wellness Program in British Columbia. I facilitate writing workshops for care partners globally through the patient-led organization you may have heard of called PD Avengers, which my husband co-founded, which was mentioned before. I'm a proud PD Avenger. And I've also been producing, planning, and providing a care partner voice for podcasts and webinars for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. So this is a very long way of telling you that along with being a Parkinson's advocate, I also consider myself a care partner advocate, which Eden said before. And I think that's a term that is new. I may have coined it, I don't know, but I used it as much as I possibly can, especially when I have audience with Parkinson's community and Parkinson's organization. I would love to be hearing that term a lot more. I also want to say briefly that I don't necessarily consider myself any more of an expert in programming for and supporting care partners than any of you. Many of you also are care partners and maybe working with care partners regularly. I welcome your thoughts during the breakout sessions. I think this is a collective conversation where we can all learn from each other, and I'm very excited to hear what your experiences and your reactions are to what I have to say. I'm fortunate to have a voice in the Parkinson's community because of the podcast and other opportunities. So I've started encouraging this conversation, especially in forums like this. And I think the first time I actually did it in this way was at the PMD Alliance event, the All In Summit, a few months ago. And so it's really kind of given me momentum and motivation and enthusiasm for talking about this. And I'm appreciative to the PMD Alliance for supporting that conversation. But there's more to the story about how I came to start talking about reframing care partner programming and involvement in the community. So after Larry was diagnosed 8 years ago, it took us a while to find ourselves as a couple. Some of you may understand this, and as a new kind of partnership. So we weren't just Larry and Beck anymore. We also were a person living with Parkinson's and his care partner, and we didn't really know how to navigate that. So what does this mean for us as individuals with individual needs and identities? And what does this mean for our relationship? In the beginning, it meant Larry's Parkinson's became the main focus of everything. I don't know that we knew how to navigate it any differently. It became top priority always, which meant that he was top priority. And I was okay with that because I didn't know any different. That was what was modeled for me. That was my programming. That was my societal programming, my family programming. And I thought that that's just what a good care partner did, right? So over time, of course, we discovered that this is not sustainable. It isn't fair and it isn't healthy. But we didn't yet know and understand what it meant for us as a family when people say, when someone has Parkinson's, their whole family has Parkinson's. We've heard that before. We've probably said it. So one of the ways that we really figured this out, what this meant to us, was through our podcast. It was a great communication tool. It was also a great learning tool for us. We learned so much doing our podcast. And the podcast started out being very much Larry telling his story. So I was on a regular segment at the end of most of the podcasts where we chatted about life, what was going on, maybe some of the content of that week's podcast. And my voice was there, but it was definitely Larry and his story being told. That was the spotlight. So as we began to engage more with the Parkinson's community, and I became more knowledgeable, I met more care partners and couples and families, and I became a consumer of the programs and support available. This started to shift. So I realized that in the community, the care partner story was always there. It was always moving and motivating and challenging, but it wasn't being told as much, and frankly, not being valued as much. So care partner specific programming was just starting to be a thing. So I was starting to see hope for, there were things that were targeted towards, there were whole programs that were targeted towards care partners. There were a lot of podcasts and programs and webinars and things that were a series. There would be episodes and things that were focused on care partners. But that was just kind of starting at that time as I was becoming a care partner and trying to figure out what that meant. So I decided to contribute to that. And I started producing and hosting care partner focused episodes of the podcast. So because of that, soon my story became more part of our story. So we shared more about how we were facing certain things as a couple, and we incorporated other care partner stories into the podcast as well. Then eventually I became a full-fledged co-host. So it took a few seasons, but my voice and the larger care partner voice became equally valued and equally present in the podcast. So all of this was a fairly accurate reflection, again, learning through by doing the podcast, right? It's a fairly accurate reflection of what I was learning and growing into as well, and what we were learning and growing into in our relationship. Through this process, I discovered the mindset that I choose to lean into every day as I face Parkinson's with my husband. And importantly, I take this mindset, this reframing that I'm going to present to you, into the programs, podcasts, and groups that I'm privileged to be part of. So to kind of get this conversation moving, I am going to pull up some slides that will tell you what I mean by reframing care partner programming. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So, by the way, I'm glad you're here, as it says on the cover. But here's what I mean by reframing care partner programming. So you'll see the old frame. This is what we hear a lot. It's the way that we that many of us and many organizations kind of approach care partner programming. It's the mindset that they take into it. I've said this before. I believe this is part of our experience. But the old frame is, the better we take care of ourselves, the better we are able to take care of others. Now, this is true. We all know that it's true, but it's a very small part of a care partner's story and a caregiver's story. It implies that perhaps our well-being is maybe less important than the people we're caring for. So I lean into the reframe, which is care partners and caregivers deserve care and support because, like everyone, we want to live our lives as fully as possible. Our lives just happen to be affected significantly by someone with health challenges, including the time that we spend taking care of them. And this makes it more difficult to maintain our own health and make our needs and wellness a priority. So this reframe, I think, is really important as you're approaching maybe your own journey as a care partner. It's been very important to mine. And it's also important to, as you interact with the care partners in your groups, and maybe as you start planning or continue planning for support programs for care partners. So the reframing reminds us all that we are care partners and caregivers, and that's why we're there. But just like the people with movement disorders that we support, we are much more than their disease or our role as care partners and caregivers. That means that we're more than an appendage to our loved one, standing next to, standing behind, coming in with, being secondary to. And when care partners and caregivers show up to events and groups, we're both sharing in the disease experience of our loved one and having our own individual experience with it. And this is that exact sentence came from a lovely person who I work with regularly named Elaine Book, who's involved here at UBC and the Brain Center and the Brain Wellness Program here. And she's also involved in many things around the US and Canada and globally. But she uses that phrase a lot. And I think it's really important to think of that. We are there because we have a person with Parkinson's or a person with a movement disorder in our life. But we are having our own individual experience with it, and it might be very different from the person who we are supporting. So we are fully individuals and deserve to be valued as that. So whether as a care partner, a person with a movement disorder, or a leader or programmer seeking to engage care partners and caregivers, it can seem challenging to make choices that are in line with this mindset, hence more slides as we go. It's so easy to understand and kind of buy into this idea intellectually, but perhaps more difficult to implement if you or your organization has been using the old frame or hasn't quite embraced the reframe. So I completely understand it's a process, a reprogramming, and I'm still working on this personally and professionally every day. So it may require a shift in how you approach your events. It may require some practical shifts and language changes. And like for me, you may need to give yourself some time to kind of figure it out and evolve. To maybe serve as a starting point for your own consideration, I'd like to pull up some other key points that may be helpful during the breakout sessions and just during your own time as you're considering this with the folks that you work with. And I do want to say that these are things that I've learned through the work that I've been doing as a consumer of the programs and as a programmer, but I've also asked for some ideas and thoughts from some people I've worked with and who are responsible for some great care partner programming and support groups. Things that you as leaders and programmers, I encourage you to keep in mind if you haven't already incorporated these ideas, and then build on it, come up with your own ideas, and then hopefully share that with your fellow programmers and with me, if you were open to that. So just going to point out some things to keep in mind. So care partners need self-care and being cared for as much as our loved ones with a condition. And our needs, desires, and challenges are typically very different from our loved one. We have our own interests, we have our own pursuits, we have the things that we would like to do, and we have our own value system, and we have our own sense of identity, and all of those things make us very much an individual. And as care partners, we often forget this and need to be reminded and encouraged to consider ourselves and our own well-being. And this is where you can come in. This is what I try to do, is to remind them of their own value and to not forget that their needs are just as important as the person they're caring for. So thoughtfully considering our needs as you make choices for your group and program is a wonderful way to encourage care partner and caregiver to take care of ourselves. If we feel valued, we are more likely to value ourselves and our own well-being. And I think this is a really important thing, and more likely return to your group or events. I have been to events at some wonderful organizations, very well-meaning organizations, where the people I would be walking in with Larry, and this was even before he was as well known as he is. I would be walking in with Larry. He would be recognized as the person with Parkinson's, and everything would be directed at him. And I wouldn't necessarily be acknowledged. Some people didn't even make eye contact with me. And I think that's getting better, that those kinds of things still happen. And there are still some organizations that's their mindset. The person with Parkinson's is the person who's really important. Everybody else coming with them is welcome, but they're less important, clearly, because this is about Parkinson's, or this is about the movement disorder. And this is the reframing where we're trying to get out of that. And did I return to those organizations? And do I feel really good about those organizations when I was treated that way? No, I do not. And maybe some of you may have had this kind of experience as well. So some questions to ask when considering the care partners in your group and in your events. Are you valuing their presence and caring for them equally to their loved one? And really think about that, how you're approaching them, how you're talking to them. Are we supporting their choices to value their own well-being equally and separately from their loved one? And that can show up in how you're presenting your programming. Are you giving them an opportunity to have respite, or maybe take care of themselves in their own way while their person with the movement disorder is getting support for themselves? Are we offering opportunities to help them do this when we can? And are we using language that reflects this mindset? I think that's important too, is to think about how you're presenting your support group, how you're talking about your support group, how you're talking in your support group. If you're leading the support group, how are you addressing care partner needs if they're incorporated into the same group and don't have their own separate one? How are you addressing and valuing what the care partner has to say, and what kind of language are you using? And those are some things to consider. So I think it's also important to talk about, and this is kind of where the breakout sessions are going to be really valuable as well. So what does this look like? Because it's really easy that everybody goes, oh, well, of course, they're valuable, they're individuals, everything like that. But how are we really living this out? And what are some things that we really need to think about on a practical basis? What does it look like? So here are some things just to put up for conversation. So whenever possible, offer a separate space, a group or a program. And this can be parallel programming. So let's say you have a person with Parkinson's or movement disorders support group happening maybe in the next room. If you're able to swing it, you have another one going on that's separate for the care partners. Also keeping in mind that if you're going to separate them out, you may need to protect those spaces and keep that boundary, because care partners may feel like the person with Parkinson's needs some care, and so they want to go into that group, or they may not want to leave them alone. The person with Parkinson's may want to stay with their care partner because they feel more secure. So you may need to address that and maybe protect and make sure that the care partners have their own space and the people with movement disorders have their own space, because we likely almost all of you know that when they are separated, they will speak differently and maybe more frankly about their experiences and share in a different way. And so there's a different level of safety that maybe you need to set up and maybe hold those boundaries. That could look different for every group, whatever your group looks like, just to think about those things. And give care partners a voice in what this looks like in your group, and ask them what they need. If you haven't already, or if they haven't vocalized it, give them an opportunity to tell you what might be helpful for them. What are their needs? It might be something that you can address in a really simple way. And then follow up with feedback. So ask them, was that what you needed? Is that a help to address your need? How can we adapt that? Really thinking about what their time looks like in your group. And some other considerations, I do want to acknowledge, we care partners, we are a tough group to program for lots of different reasons. Mostly the third bullet point there, which is that we live uncertain lives. Things change quickly. We're caring for others. We have a lot of plates spinning a lot of the time. And so we often have to cancel last minute. That it leads to the other bullet point of requiring flexibility and resilience in the support group leaders and the programmers. it is acknowledged, it is valued when this programming is offered and when you are supporting them in thinking about care partner needs. But we may not always be able to participate at the level that we really want to, because of the considerations that we have. So just know that it is noticed and appreciated. And if you need to adapt something, then that requires the flexibility and resilience. I also want to go back up to under We Are a Tough Group to Program For, in the italics there. And I added this after our All In summit, when this came up as part of the conversation when Larry and I gave a presentation that was very similar to this. Gender can play a significant role, and one of the things that you maybe need to consider, because we know that men and women tend to have kind of different programming and expectations when it comes to caregiving and being a care partner. And so I think it's important to just kind of acknowledge that, and acknowledge that if it's a mixed group of men and women, that there might be different viewpoints and different values and different ideas what it means to be a caregiver and what self-care means. And just being aware of that, I think, is really valuable. Some more considerations: even very simple offerings or changes can make a really big impact. And I think even if it's just making that gesture of, I really want to value your needs as a care partner, are we doing a good job of that? What can you do? If it's just a room where they can just be quiet while they know that their person with the movement disorder is being cared for, giving them the space and the safety to do that, and inviting them to do that, that can make a huge difference. I think it's important to acknowledge that online offerings can be really easier for people with care partners. It's one of the benefits of some of the lemonade that came from COVID, where a lot of things are online now, and you can participate in lots of different programs from places all over the world. It can be really valuable, and it is online. And so it can be easier, because then you have the flexibility if you need to leave and mute yourself and leave for a little bit, just like here, and take care of yourself or take care of the people you're caring for. Then you have the flexibility to do that. It's less travel, it's safety, all of the things. I think that that's a wonderful way to support, is if you can do it online, it's wonderful. And then that also gives you the opportunity to record it, so people can benefit from whatever may have been presented later at a time if they can't come to the actual event. And then I think something that's really super valuable is one-on-one interactions, and giving people an opportunity to participate in that, if you don't already have a system, or even maybe an informal system that's set up like that. If you've got somebody who is a care partner of someone who is newly diagnosed, and they're coming into the support group, and they have that look that we all had in those early days of the deer in headlights. I have no idea why I'm here, what I'm doing. I just know that maybe this might be helpful. Then maybe, identifying someone they may be a good match with, so that they can kind of buddy up and do it even in an informal way. There are some organizations that have larger mentorships and buddy programs and matching programs, and those are great too. But I think that one-on-one interaction, especially if your support groups are regional and you're in a nearby location, and that you have the option of doing in person with the buddy program, with the interaction, I think that can be a really valuable way to. It's easier sometimes to share with one person and call that one person at 2:00 in the morning if something has gone awry, than it is to wait for that support group at Thursday at 10:00 in the morning. And so I think that's just something to consider. It might take a little bit more coordination and work, but I find those programs to be really valuable. That one-on-one interaction as an option is fantastic. Okay, so I am done with my presentation here. So I'm gonna turn off my sharing.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and I just want to say, I turned off the sharing, but thank you so much, everybody. I look forward to hearing what you have to say and how we can continue this conversation. And I'm thrilled that you're here and that you're part of the conversation now. So, and thank you to the PMD Alliance.
So before we go into our breakout rooms, do any folks have questions for Rebecca? if you'd either like to send them to me or come off mute and ask the question. Because you provided some great information. And I do think it is important because, at first when you were talking, I thought, it's so interesting because I know one thing that I've heard people with Parkinson's ask, oh, 1 second, Karen, is they say like it bothers them when somebody doesn't speak to them anymore. And so I thought, gosh, it's almost like that reverse where, they're so going out of their way to talk to the person with Parkinson's and then they're ignoring you. And you're like, well, that's not nice either.
Yeah.
So, and then Karen, what was your question? You're on mute. You got to come off mute.
I think I'm off mute.
Yep.
Yes.
Hi, I'm actually looking to develop a caregiver's guide through me because I say not if, but when my family will need something like that. So that's what I'm looking to put together and present to my support group because many of them feel, oh, but we can take care of ourselves now. Well, you can, but when you can't, have something in place. So that's what I'm looking for.
That sounds valuable. Sounds like a valuable project.
Yes, Edna. Do you want to come up? There you go.
Good morning. And I love BC, by the way. It's one of my favorite provinces. So I'm originally from Montreal. Anyway, I'm in a unique position right now as a not really as a care partner, although that always, but as a support group leader. So our support group, most of the members in our support group live in the area where the devastating Eaton fires were in Southern California, Pasadena, Altadena. And so there's so much displacement and so much loss and moving around, like trying to find a place to live. So the caregivers, care partners have been so hammered with incredibly new situations and difficult situations. Many have lost their homes. Some are in hotels, some ended up in assisted living, some are renting, but they're not in their comfort zones anymore. And I don't know, it's just so hard. It's just so hard. And I think it's going to require like just a totally different approach for this displacement of both the person with Parkinson's and the care partner.
Yeah, and it might be worth having that conversation, just saying, okay, we're gonna, as many of you as can show up to this next one, we're just gonna have a conversation for how do we need to regroup? What are your needs now? How can we address that? And really, because I'm guessing those are very unique needs. It's a very unique situation, unique stressors and all, and the displacement and disconnection that comes with that.
Especially with those that have some dementia, some, cognitive issues, just the moving around. Like one family I know, they were in 4 different places before they finally found like a house to rent. So for the person with Parkinson's, and then, the wheelchair, is there a ramp? Is like everything was, the shower, everything was tested for so many people.
Yeah, and it might be that their needs are more practical for a while. And how can we help each other practically? Right. And then kind of shift back into a more traditional support group. But ask them, I guess, is what I would say. But curious what others may say about that as well.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry that you're dealing with that and that they all are. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we go into breakout rooms? And Rebecca will be in breakout rooms, so she's going to kind of bounce around a little bit. So you will have an opportunity to ask questions if you're kind of like, well, I don't necessarily want to ask everyone. Just know she's going to be available, and then we're going to come back. So Kelly's going to put everyone in breakout rooms. You don't need to do anything. We're going to give you about 40 minutes. We'll come back around 10 after, and we'll see you shortly. Welcome back, everyone. Glad to see everyone back. I'm going to go ahead. Now, as always, I say chances are you might have talked about something else in your breakout sessions, but I just, give a guide. So I'd like to ask room one, Anissa, Corey, Gail, and Julie, what did y'all talk about? Who'd like to come off mute and share? I know this is not a quiet group, so who's going to do it?
It's not, but I don't want to be the one that just talk. Corey, did you want to give a nice?
I'll start, but
synopsis?
you can fill in because I
Okay.
felt like I did a lot of talking about my frustration when I was the care partner, and basically I talked a lot about that. We did talk about the logistics of, if you can break into two rooms, one for the care partners and one for the people with Parkinson's, which obviously is far more difficult if the person running the group is by themselves versus if they have a co-leader. So we talked about that. We talked about sort of directing the conversation to asking the person, like, we're not going to talk about your frustration with your loved ones today. We're going to talk about what you really need for you, and maybe put some boundaries so they can't say, like, well, I wish you didn't have Parkinson's so we could go back to our old life, because obviously that's not going to happen. But what they could do for now. And felt that Rebecca's presentation was excellent and spot on. So thank you, Rebecca. So, okay, Anissa, you can fill in now.
So, yeah, you did a fantastic job. The only thing I will add additional to that was we also talked about how, unfortunate that there are circumstances where we learn about how incredible people are as humans outside of any diagnosis, whether it's the person with or the care partner, until like after they're gone. And so what a loss that is, when we should be celebrating what makes us us at the moment. And that sometimes that could be the focus of a group, as Corey was saying, whether it's collectively or with the care partners, and focusing on their needs. And then we also talked about I just lost it. Oh, well, I had a really good thought, but I just came and left as quickly. But it was a really good conversation because I really got a chance to know Corey and Gail, and they're each like in different parts of the country, and they're each running different kinds of groups. But I think we've all agreed that, I know what it was, that one of the things that might be helpful, even if we cannot have separate groups, is talking about an early identification of how do you set yourself up to be able to care well for yourself through the whole journey of the diagnosis, so that you're not waiting till you're in a crisis to make a decision and trying to figure out what your resources are under duress, but like start having those conversations early and start building in practices to take what that means, good care of yourself, and how frustrating it is when you're later on down the road, when you need to have time for yourself, you don't have the resources for it, and people ask you like to, or tell you to take care of yourself, and what does that even mean? How do I even do that? And so maybe part of that is being proactive early on and having those conversations early with your support group members about the importance of it, to not put off thinking about what you want, what you need, what that looks like for you each individually.
Anyone else from room one? Let's go on to room two. We've got Carol, we've got Kiana, we've got Myra, we've got Nasreen, we've got Phil, and we've got Rebecca. Myra, do you want to tell us what your group talked about? You're on mute. Why don't you come off mute?
Okay, I am. First off, I want to say, Anissa, I've never seen you with your hair back. Okay, from there, it was a really interesting talk, and we had one of the people in my group is a practitioner actually, and she was sharing how much she does with her patient and what she wants to learn from the patient and how she is involved with them. And I just wish she would talk it all over the world, that we would have more practitioners that are helping us and are listening. She's not in my view right now, and unfortunately I can't remember her name. Do you know the names of? But she was excellent, and that she wants more time with them. Patients, she actually runs a group to get to know them better. So it was neat. It was wonderful to see somebody who was sharing and with, wants good for both the patient and the caregiver. And it was really interesting to hear that. We also had someone else who was talking about her group and how they've done various valuable things. Maybe we should check with someone else to come up with ideas, but it was a really interesting group. And to have Andrea lead it, wow, we were lucky. I was hoping she was going to take this. So when you asked me, I was like, ah!
Anybody
How about
else
somebody else from the group?
from room 2 want to chime in?
Could the practitioner please share her thoughts? I think everybody would like to hear it.
Oh, well, hi, everyone. Some of you I know, I'm Nasrin. I am a nurse practitioner and I work with University of Southern California. And yes, indeed, we had the fire and I was one of those groups that had to evacuate. But we are here and we are LA strong. So everything would be resolved. In any way, I was talking about my long experience with patients who have Parkinson, and I take care of them. I'm particularly specialized in deep brain stimulators, and I explained that about 15 years ago, 2010, I started the support group for my patient, their family, and their caregiver, because I realized that people, when they are diagnosed with a progressive neurological illness such as Parkinson's disease, essential tremor, or even dystonia, because I have all those patients, this is a life sentence in a way, but in any way, there is a lot of cure, there is a lot of medication. And because of the way our clinics are set up everywhere, I'm not talking about Southern California or Maine or everywhere, practically in Western medicine. We have certain time to see a patient, write a diagnosis, a prescription, and then see them again in a few months or maybe send them somewhere else. However, when you have a patient with neurological illness, we are a lifetime provider for them unless they change their insurance or they change their doctor. Therefore, it gives us a permission to get to know these people. And I realized way back then, because my entire career after I finished education was working with these patients, that there is a lot is get lost in the translation when a patient and their family, and sometimes by themselves, go and see a doctor, they get diagnosis, and then there they are, they take their medication, and a lot of times for the first few years, and some of you who had Parkinson or know Parkinson, things seems to be okay. However, this current is going on, and a lot is going on underneath. People may not be aware of it, so are not the family members. There is mood change. There is a lot of non-motor symptoms that some of you know this term and you know what it means, but patient doesn't. So I came with this idea that we need a different way of connecting with this patient, or at least I do, to get to know them and help them with things that they may not know or may not be found in any brochure. They need to hear it from someone who has the education. So I started this group. It's once a month for 1.5 hours. The only condition is patients have a DBS or be confirmed for DBS, because we are not I'm not selling DBS, neither do I advertise it in any way. And these patients all have DBS. And every month we have one of our physician, social worker, physical therapist, nutritionist, psychologist. I invite them. They come and speak for 1 hour and a half, including surgeons. We have 3 surgeons, and every one of them take a turn to have a speech once a year. And I actually ask them before they come in, I'm saying, this is a kind of candid conversation. I want you to give them the reality, and then patient have 45 minutes to ask questions. I personally don't know anywhere in the entire, maybe our country or anywhere, that a surgeon, a brain surgeon, sits 45 minutes outside their clinic time without a penny of money, because my entire DBS group doesn't have any fund. It's all based on my time, effort, and my patients, kind of kindness to come to it for all these years, and they keep coming. So we use it as an educational platform. When a psychologist talks about memory or memory loss, they talk to patient, they talk to caregiver, they talk to friends. Even I myself, I'm learning. And I was explaining is that in my clinic that I see these patients, and almost always they are with someone because someone is driving them. Rarely patient come by themselves. But if they have a caregiver, I always ask the caregiver, particularly if they are significant others, if there is anything they want to talk to me in private or just ask their question. What are they doing? Actually, this is one of my kind of, steps I go through when I sit there and I say hi to them. And of course, they all know who I am, unless they don't. This is my first time that I introduce myself. And I ask them, okay, how are you doing? And then I turn around to the person who is usually a wife or a husband, a father or sister, and say, how are you doing? How is it going with you? And it is interesting how much I learn about my patient through that conversation. And that is one of the things that I think I said to my group, I couldn't do it other way. And I enjoy it because I get to realize that this is a human to human connection. This is not me sitting there to looking at my clock to just do something with DBS, change a medication, write a prescription, and say, I'll see you in 4 months, I see you next year, or I see you in 6 months. And I said, to me, where we are now with the Western medicine, we have all the science, the knowledge, the research. What we need is add a bit of spirituality, humanity, and kindness into our work, then we are perfect. And that's what I practice. And, I expect from my own clinician as well, too. Do I always get it? No, but I'm always hoping to get it from my dentist at least, because that is the very, very essence of everything. That being said, thank you so much for listening. If there is any question, I'm here and I'm, accessible. People in PMD know me for years. I've been with them from the beginning. I have an email through USC, and I'm here to help.
Thank you so much, Nasreen, for sharing. Corey, I love that you had the little hearts going up. That was adorable. Thank you so much for sharing. And now, before we join room 3, we've got Dave, we've got Edna, we've got Sebi, we've got Jason, we've got Kai, we've got Karen, and we've got Rebecca K. Who wants to come off mute and share what you all discussed? Don't make me call on you, because Dave, I'll call on you.
I will. I'll just start. So, most of the session was basically about how to separate the PWPs and the care partners into 2 groups, if possible. Again, always worried about the safety, the vulnerability of those in the PWP group. If they are in 2 separate rooms, how will that work? Also, a big topic was male care partners and how few will come forth. Akai was talking about that in her group in Hawaii, and how much more difficult it is to get the guys to come in. Yeah, anybody else? My memory is
Yeah, just briefly, one of the suggestions was to maybe start off with one-on-one with men. So it's not just, plopping into a big support group and opening themselves up, which I thought was an excellent idea. We have men in our PD circle, but not in our support groups, and that might be a way for them to start connecting more informally. So that was a good thought.
Who else? Dave, you came off mute.
I suggested taking all the caregivers to a bar so they can all get loose and get to know each other.
And the fact that you're a caregiver has nothing to do with that suggestion.
Well, no, it's they need to talk by themselves. They're also people that want to be loved, wanted, and appreciated, and they need to have a place where they can talk. They can't talk to their partners about how they feel without being insensitive to their partner. So it doesn't matter if they're men or women. I think a caregiver is a caregiver, and they have needs that are different.
That's actually something we talk about in our care partner support group, is because it is also hard sometimes for them to talk to other friends, because depending on where they are in their life, their friend might say, well, you should be grateful because at least your partner's still alive, for example. And it's like, I'm not being ungrateful, but it's hard, and there is still an ambiguous loss there. It might not be this clear-cut defined loss, but it is still a loss that this person isn't the same anymore. And it's harder, and I've had to make adjustments. Any final thoughts from group 3 or from anyone, group 2, group 1, that you'd all like to share?
Well, one of the things that I'm going to try to do is to reach out to United Way. They run a caregiver class, but they have expertise in this area that I don't. And I can't be everything to everybody. So if I can create a working partnership where they can do something to complement what I'm doing, it's an easy way for me to do it. Again, it's how much time do I have? How effective can I be if I'm trying to do so many things that it becomes, I'm ineffective at everything that I do.
And that's not a good way to feel, when you feel like I'm trying so hard and it's just not, I'm ineffective.
No, that's a great idea, though, to call in the help.
Things impossible as long as I don't have to do it myself.
Well, I do want to remind Kelly, put in the chat, we do have our care partner group this week. Actually, it's on the 1st and 3rd Thursdays, and it is virtual. So I do encourage everyone to check us out because we're a fun group. Next month, we're going to have Lori and Mike DePorter speaking on the ripple effect of of Parkinson's disease. So I hope everyone joins us. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everything you do as support group leaders, because we need you and we're grateful for you. And I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.